Hello, and welcome to everyone listening. Like at every meditation, before we begin, we like to remind you that what is being presented is based on logical reasoning and an extensive use of the notions of cause and effect as the fundamental law that governs all produced things. This is being said to ensure that you use your own critical thinking and be aware of any irrational thought that might object and to try thinking about it before discarding the idea. Therefore, the teaching will try to follow logical reasoning. So if something is not clear, please feel free to send your thoughts and questions to guide@personalmeditationguide.com. And now we will begin with a meditation to calm the mind, to release any tensions and stresses, so that our mind is clear to contemplate the second part. So please take a comfortable meditation posture in which you can be both relaxed and alert. Make sure that your back is straight, but not tense. Place your hands in your lap and partially close your eyes. Now just take a few moments to let all your tensions of your mind and in your body fall away. Now create a positive intention or motivation to use this meditation to clear your mind, to calm your mind. And now you can gently bring your attention at the tip of your nostrils, at the sensation of coolness as you inhale and warmth as you exhale. Do not try to control your breathing. Just engage the tactile sensation of the breath at the tip of your nostrils. Let the experience of the coolness and warmth pervade your mind, and let every other thought and feeling fall away. And if your mind wanders or becomes numb, in either case, take notice of it, smile, and bring your mind gently and peacefully back at the sensation of the breath at the tip of your nostrils. Now, imagine that your mind is like the sky, and that your thoughts and feelings and any other mental activity are like clouds. Just as clouds form and disperse within the sky, your thoughts and feelings appear and dissolve within your mind. So just watch as your thoughts and feelings arise and dissolve within your mind. Do not hold on to anyone in particular. Just watch. And just as when all the clouds disperse to reveal the clarity of the sky, which is empty like space, free from obstruction and limitless, so let all your thoughts and feelings dissolve, and come to see the clarity of your mind, which just like a clear blue sky, is empty like space, free from obstruction and limitless. And once you have found the experience of the clarity of your mind, meditate on it and enjoy the peace of mind that it evokes. And if any other thoughts arise or feelings arise, then just like a cloud, let it dissolve and come back to the clarity of your mind, which is just like a clear blue sky. And now, before rising from meditation, make a determination to maintain this clarity of mind and this peace of mind, so that it influences everything you think, say, and do. And now you can gently rise from meditation. So in this class, we will be discussing anger. This is part 1 of 4 parts, as there is a lot to say with regards to anger. Now, what we're going to try to do is we're going to explain anger, especially that in the English language there are many words to describe derivatives or different levels of anger. Now, usually we could sometimes see anger as this big state of mind, very out there, screaming and getting violent and aggressive, and those states. But anger, the way we're going to define it, is more like a scale. And in the English language, like we were saying, we could use the word irritation, annoyance, even boredom, frustration, hate. So all these words are an expression of the scale of anger. And the reason why we can see it as a scale of anger is because we're going to learn to define anger so that we can come to recognize anger when anger arises in our mind. Now, another important aspect that we'll be discussing is that we'll be learning how to eliminate anger from our mind. Now, this is a big proposition, as we can see a lot of anger management classes out there or other ways of dealing with anger, whereas there's never the possibility of removing it from our mind completely, as if it is inherent to our mind, as if we have no other choice in getting angry. And we're going to learn how this is really just a default reaction to things, and through training the mind, and if you listen to a second class on meditation, is that these meditations will help us retrain our mind so that we react differently to external adversities. So that instead of the mind of anger, or whatever word we want to use, irritation, frustration, boredom, annoyance, and so on and so forth, we learn to react in a more peaceful way, which does not destroy our peace of mind. And what we're going to learn throughout this series is how patience, which is the antidote to anger, is really a courageous mind. It's not passiveness. And we're going to learn how this is the case. Now, to get into the topic at hand, we have to come to see how anger is one of the most common and destructive of states of minds. And it actually inflicts us almost every single day. It could be as simple as stubbing our toe, or something just not going the way we want it to go. And as you can see, anger, and the way it will be defined, is the whole scale of these emotions and these feelings that we could be feeling. So we'll see how it does afflict us almost every single day. Now, if it doesn't for you, then congratulations, and I'm very happy for you that anger is not part of your mind. But in case, like the most of us, anger can afflict us on many levels. So to solve the problem of anger, we first need to recognize the anger within our own mind. And then we need to acknowledge how it actually harms us, the way it harms others, and to learn about the antidote, which is patience, and to learn to appreciate its benefits, and how patience actually helps us in the face of difficulties. Only when we've understood these will we have the motivation and the understanding to want to practice and train our mind in patience so that it becomes our default reaction. And what we're going to learn are practical methods that are applicable in our daily lives to reduce our anger and finally to prevent it from arising at all. So first, what is anger? So anger is a state of mind that really focuses on an object, so it could be an animate or an inanimate object, feels it to be unattractive, and exaggerates its bad qualities. And if we push it, it wishes to harm that thing. So for example, when we get angry with our partner, at that moment, our partner appears to be unattractive or unpleasant. We then exaggerate our partner's bad qualities by focusing only on those aspects that irritate us and ignoring all the good qualities and kindness. So basically, we build up a mental image of a faulty person. And if this continues and we let it play out, we then wish to harm our partner in some way. And it could be by criticizing them, by rolling our eyes, by sighing, by turning away. It could be subtle. And this is why, as you can see from the definition, that it really is a scale, meaning from the littlest of annoyances to the strongest of hatreds, that this is really always a state of mind of anger. Because the definition comes to explain how it's the way we see things, that we feel something to be unattractive, and our mind kind of silos in. It forgets about every other quality of this thing and only sees the negative. Now, depending on how unattractive or how unpleasant we see this object, could be animate or inanimate, so a living being or not, will define the scale at which we feel this anger, the strength and intensity of this anger. So as you can see, it really defines a whole scale. So going forward from now, I'll just be using the word anger to talk about any of these scales. Now, what's going to be important for us on a personal level will be to come and see how any slight feeling of unpleasantness and any slight feeling of unattractiveness, and when our mind is just zeroing in on the bad parts of that thing, then we could identify it as anger. So we might feel uncomfortable at the beginning to use the word anger because we usually feel anger to be a very gross and kind of powerful state of mind, but we have to come to see that the way we'll be using it now, it ranges from all its scales. So if it helps you and the word anger kind of bothers us, so please feel free to use the appropriate language that makes you comfortable in identify this feeling. So as the example of our partner, let's say they do something that we don't wish them to do, or they say something that we wish they wouldn't have said. Basically, we see our partner in a very different light. All we see is how this person is bad. And we kind of forget all the kindness they have showed to us in other circumstances, and we just see a faulty person. Basically, they're problematic as a whole, and we start to lose the bigger picture of all the circumstances that we've lived through with this other person. So this is a good example to maybe we could see in our own life, and it doesn't have to be a partner, it could be a friend or any acquaintance or any person that we find unpleasant, that we see as inherently bad. We could probably find in our own personal experiences this feeling of anger that has already occurred in our life. Now, with regards to inanimate objects, we could take the weather, for instance. We don't like the weather to be a certain way, we wish it to be another way. And therefore, we get angry. Okay? We get angry, we feel anger, because we wish it to be something else. So we find the weather to be unpleasant. What doesn't apply in this case is our ability to harm this inanimate object, because it is impossible, but yet we do sometimes have the wish to harm it. Or we become sort of aggressive and going like, how dare. It's like, if I would be able to harm the weather, we would try to do it. And we take this even, let's say, in the case where we fall sick. Our bodies fall sick, we get a disease, and we become angry. We feel that we wish for it not to be the case. And therefore, we feel that cancer or any other disease is inherently bad. And instead of accepting it, which will be coming towards the answer to this, we want to harm something. Okay, we become aggressive towards something, and everything becomes a problem. And we know, and we've probably felt in our own lives, that when we feel angry and we harbor this anger in our mind, that everything else becomes unpleasant as well. Everything around us. Anybody that comes to see us, it becomes an unpleasant experience. And our whole day unfolds in this veil of anger, and everything that touches us in some way, or everything that comes towards us, is always seen in a negative light. Even if someone with the most wonderful intentions is trying to help us, we are ready to push this person away and treat them badly, because our mind of anger is very close-minded, and we only see everything as red and negative. So as we can see, just from our own personal experiences, that anger is an extremely destructive mind that actually serves no purpose at all. And once we've understood the nature and the disadvantages of anger, we will then watch our mind more carefully at all times in order to recognize it whenever it begins to rise. So it's important to look at our own personal experience and come to see how the state of mind is destroying our peace of mind and our own happiness. And it goes so far as to destroy other people's state of mind and happiness, because as well they take it in a negative way, and they don't have the ability to see it as leaving it with the other person, as it's their anger and there's nothing more you can do about it. So people take it personal. So it does have a big impact to ourselves and all those around us. And we could see that anger, this unpleasantness, if it becomes very strong and very lively, we could see it that it becomes aggressive, and we will harm others. And it could start verbally, but it ends up being physical as well. And then we see the oncomings of hatred arising within our mind. Now, what is also sometimes difficult to understand, and this is all about a basic law of cause and effect, is how an object in motion tends to stay in motion. This is a basic law of cause and effect, although it applies to our mind as well. And what that means is that our mind of anger, if left unchecked, if we don't put a stop to it, will have an inertia and will keep perpetuating itself. We're kind of practicing ourselves, or we're training ourselves to respond in anger ongoingly. So this anger will have more and more impacts. It will be more and more pervasive within our mind, and we will be responding more and more in that way if left unchecked, basically. And this is sometimes hard for us to understand, because we want to believe that our states of minds have no impact, as if they appear and they disappear and they don't have an effect. And unfortunately, if everything is always based on the law of cause and effect, it would necessarily mean that it does have an effect. And why it's difficult for us to see is because the effects are within our own mind. They don't have any physical or material aspect to the effect. It really is more of a behavioral. It becomes a behavioral or a state of mind effect. So what that means is that we're programming ourselves essentially to become angry all the time, and we're perpetuating that state of mind. So this is one of the aspects that we fail to see, and has a very destructive nature from that perspective, because it never ends the cycle. So we always perpetuate our anger within our own mind. So as we can see within our own experiences, anger is really a painful state of mind. Whenever we develop anger, our inner peace immediately disappears. And even our body becomes tense and uncomfortable. We are so restless that sometimes we find it nearly impossible to fall asleep. And if we do manage to fall asleep, it is usually unrefreshing. We toss and we turn, and our mind rummages on the idea of why this happened to me, and why did this happen, and so on and so forth. It is impossible to enjoy ourselves when we are angry. Even the food we eat seems unpleasant. It's like we're angry and we eat food that maybe is usually very good for us, but in that moment of anger, our mind does not enjoy it, doesn't take pleasure in that good food. So we could see how our mind really warps things and destroys the way we see everything. And our anger also transforms the people we see that normally we find attractive. But in those states of mind of anger, everything becomes a problem. even the people that are normally pleasant around us, that has a wonderful intention of helping us, we see them as problematic and we push them away. So we could see this in our own personal lives, how anger destroys our peace of mind. And as we grow more and more miserable, no matter how hard we try, we'll have a hard time controlling our emotions. And maybe we haven't seen this in ourselves, but I'm sure we've seen this in others. Because of their mind of anger, they lose complete control over themselves and they make horrible mistakes. They make mistakes that they regret in the end, such as writing a bad email to someone out of anger. And unfortunately, it comes back to them because no one wants to be around people that are angry. And we notice this. How does it feel to be next to people that are unpleasant and always angry? We really do not wish to be around them. They bring everything down. They destroy everything. And we could only see this sometimes if our mind is lucid and we think about it in a peaceful way to see how anger destroys everything. If we could see it in others, we don't want to be around people that are angry all the time and destructive, that we could easily see that if we're angry, then the people around us will not want to be with us, will not want to stay around us. So if we could see it in others, it's important to try to see it in ourselves. Now, one of the most harmful effects of anger is that it robs us of our reason and good sense. Wishing to retaliate against those we think have harmed us, we expose ourselves to great personal danger merely for petty revenge. To get even for perceived injustices and slights, we are prepared to jeopardize our job, our relationships, and even the well-being of our family and our children. Really, when we are angry, we just lose all our freedom of choice. We're driven here and there by uncontrollable rage. Now, unfortunately, sometimes this blind rage is directed at our loved ones. And in a fit of anger, we forget the kindness that they have shown us. And we even might strike against them. We might criticize them. And striking against them doesn't necessarily mean physically. It could mean verbally. We strike against them. We try to pick at them. We try to hurt them. We try to insult them and criticize them. And this is just because our mind of anger has robbed us of looking at the bigger picture and forgetting the kindness that these people have shown us. And you'll see that soon enough, the more we stay angry, the more alone we'll be. People will try to avoid us. Another place where we see anger is particularly destructive is in relationships. Now, when we live in close contact with someone, we can see that our personalities, our priorities, our interests, and ways of doing things frequently clash. Now, we spend so much time together, and since we know the other person so well, we also know their shortcomings. And it becomes very easy for us to become critical and short-tempered with our partner and to blame them for making our life so uncomfortable. Like any little thing starts bothering us. Okay? And unfortunately, they accumulate. And then we see this shortcoming, and then we see this other shortcoming, and our mind ends up focusing only on the faults and kind of forgets everything else they do for us. We stop looking at everything, and we only see the problems. And we know how that happens so easily with a partner, and we take them for granted, and our mind focuses on these problems. And what happens over time is that if we don't make continuous effort to actually remove this anger and to talk peacefully and calmly, even though there are clashes, but to approach them with reason and logic and with peace of mind and with love. That if we don't control and if we don't make an effort to actually remove this anger from our mind, our relationships suffer. A couple that genuinely loves each other, but if they're frequently caught up in anger, you'll see that the times they're happy together will be fewer and fewer. And basically the only thing they're cycling from is from one argument to the next. And they never have a time where they actually feel peace of mind and happiness with each other. And eventually, before long, if that happens, then we could see how these relationships end up severing. These people split, these partnerships and these relationship splits. And we could see that this applies not only to partners, like as in a relationship partner, but any type of relationship, be it a business relationship or an intimate and personal relationship, any relationship with a person. If anger takes precedence over reason and peace of mind, the relationship will surely end, and in a negative way. So love cannot survive in such circumstances. Now, in close relationships, once again, opportunities to get angry arise many times a day. So to prevent buildup of bad feelings, we really need to deal with our anger as soon as it begins to arise in our mind. It's like clearing away the dishes after every meal rather than waiting until the end of the month, because we really don't want to live in a dirty house and be faced with a huge, unpleasant job. So in the same way, we really need to make an effort to clear away the mess in our mind as soon as it appears. Because if we allow it to accumulate, it will become more and more difficult to deal with. And it will endanger our relationship. So we should remember that every opportunity to develop anger is also an opportunity to develop patience. So if we practice these instructions on patience, explained in this part and in the following parts, we can really transform our relationships into opportunities for growing our mind. Because it is through our anger and our hatred that we transform people into enemies. Actually, it is the anger already present within us that transforms the person we meet into an imagined enemy. Because someone controlled by anger lives within a paranoid view of the world. Really, they're surrounded by enemies of their own creation. This false belief that everyone hates them can become so overwhelming that he might even go insane, just the victim of his own anger. Now, oftentimes in a group, this is another example. There's always a person, let's say, that always blames others for what goes wrong. Yet we know that it's generally the person who complains who is responsible for the disharmony that arises within the group. So these are just other examples to really come to see within our own lives how anger destroys. And these are important to contemplate over and over again and to see them within our own personal experiences. Otherwise, we won't be convinced that anger is the problem. We're going to keep thinking that the problem is out there. It's in the people we meet, is in the circumstances we have, and in the situations we have. Instead of turning our mind within our own self and seeing that it's a state of mind that we have that is kind of painting the world in a certain way. It's painting the world as unpleasant, as unattractive, as everyone is an enemy. And we fail to realize that it's the state of mind of anger that is doing this. And until we recognize that the mind of anger, which is within our own self, until we realize that, we will never come to get rid of it. Because we're never resolving the right problem. And this is where we come to see that it can be eliminated. Because we're not trying to eliminate our external adversities. because we know that these are not in our control. They're completely out of our control. The only thing we can learn to control, if we choose to, is the states of minds we keep and the ones we let go of. The ones we cultivate and the ones we eliminate. That is the only thing that we have control over, and fortunately, it's the only thing that creates happiness and our suffering. It's within our own mind. And a state of mind of anger always creates suffering for ourselves. So this is an important contemplation, to contemplate how anger is a poison. It's the anger within our own mind that is destroying our peace of mind, not our adversities. It's very important to identify the actual cause of whatever unhappiness we feel. Because if we're always blaming our difficulties on others, then this is just a clear sign that there are many problems and faults within our own mind. Because if we were truly peaceful inside, and I'm sure we've met individuals, we've met people that are truly peaceful inside, and no matter what adversities they face, they manage to stay peaceful and loving and calm and compassionate. So if we were truly peaceful inside, really, and our mind was under our control, because difficult people and circumstances will not be able to disturb our inner peace. So we wouldn't feel compelled to blame others and regard them as our enemy. Really, to someone who has eliminated all anger from their minds, really everyone becomes their friend. From their perspective, everyone is their friend. They don't have enemies anymore. And there are very few people who wish to harm someone who's a friend to the world. There's very few people who wish to harm someone who's peaceful and calm. And even if they do so, this person will be able to find patience and forgiveness and love and compassion within their heart, and they will still remain peaceful no matter the adversity that comes their way. Now, what's important is that we shouldn't think that this is impossible, that eliminating our anger is an impossible goal. Because otherwise we're sabotaging our training, we're sabotaging our growth. We're actually, from the get-go, believing that it is impossible to do. But by relying on appropriate methods, and by relying on logic and reason and the law of cause and effect, we could understand that it is possible. Just as if we don't plant the seed of an apple tree, we don't get an apple tree. Okay? That means if we don't create the cause, then we don't get the effect. Then it is the same thing for anger. If we remove the causes and conditions for anger to arise, then anger has no way to arise. Okay, for instance, if we understand the definition of anger to be our mind that focuses on the faults of a thing. Okay, so there's an unattractive, an unpleasant feeling that arises in our mind, and our mind focuses on only the problems. Then we understand that if we don't focus on the problems, that we bring in the whole picture in our mind doesn't have the conditions for anger to arise. Yes, that unpleasant feeling will arise uncontrollably, but we'll have an opportunity after that to do something about our mind, especially if we learn to catch it when it arises, so that we could direct it and bring in the bigger picture every single time. So we can see that if we remove the causes and conditions for anger to arise, anger cannot arise within our mind. So even if the seed is there, meaning we've gotten angry in the past and now we have a reactionary mind of anger. So the seed for it to reoccur is there. But if we don't water it, can the seed come to sprout? No, it's missing, it's lacking the necessary conditions for it to arise. So that's why it's extremely important to understand the laws of cause and effect. And we will be doing another meditation in the future with regards to this law, to really come to understand how it affects our mind. So this comes just to show us, to come to understand that removing and eliminating anger from our mind is possible. And just imagine what a world would be like if everyone had conquered their anger. There would be no danger of war. Armies would become unnecessary. Machine guns, tanks, nuclear weapons. So all these instruments of destruction would be put away. There would be no need for them, because it is only the mind of anger that wants to harm others. Without the mind of anger, there is no wish to harm others. So we could just imagine. But how does this world come to appear for us? First and foremost, we need to change. We cannot expect others to change if we haven't changed ourselves. Only by showing through example can we come to help others. Otherwise, we just pay lip service. But in the end, we're going to turn to anger and want to harm others. So that we could see this, we could imagine this, and we could see how all these problems in the world disappear. But it starts with us. So even if this universal peace and harmony seems too much to hope for, imagine the freedom and peace of mind each of us individually would enjoy if we managed to free ourselves completely from this distorted and destructive mind, the mind of anger. So even if it just seems too much, if we imagine a whole world, but we could see our peace of mind emerge from letting go our anger. So these are all contemplations to come to see and to come to the conviction that the anger in our mind is the issue. It's not out there. So having understood the many faults of anger, we should start watching our mind as closely as possible all the time. And as soon as we start to see our mind getting agitated, for example, when dwelling on someone's faults or blaming someone for the unpleasant feelings in our mind, we should immediately recall the faults of anger. Okay? We should immediately recall all the problems that anger brings with us. Everything we've just talked about. All the destruction of our happiness, our peace of mind, and the future training, meaning we never get rid of our anger in the future. Okay? We perpetuate our default reactions in our future self. So remembering that getting angry will solve nothing and only create more suffering for ourselves and others, we should then try to make an effort to try to channel our mind in a more constructive way. So if we are able to recognize a negative train of thought before it develops into full-blown anger, it is not too hard to control. So if we can do this, there's actually no danger of anger being bottled up and turning into resentment. So we have to understand that controlling our anger and repressing anger are two very different things. So repression occurs when anger has developed fully in our mind, but we fail to acknowledge its presence. Okay, so basically we're pretending to ourselves and to others that we're not angry. And we might control our outward expression of anger, but not anger itself. Basically, we're not being honest. And you could see it sometimes. Let's say someone asks us if we're angry, and we react as, "What are you talking about? I'm not angry." And that just goes to show that our mind is not ready to acknowledge that we're feeling angry. And sometimes we might think, well, I'm not acting out my anger, so basically I'm not expressing it to other people. So basically, we could say, oh, well, I'm not really expressing my anger. I'm not showing other people. I'm keeping a nice face. I'm smiling. But really internally, we're really angry. So basically, this is where we don't consider that our mind and the feelings we keep in our mind actually have an effect. We believe that it's only the way we express ourselves to others and the way we act outwardly that has an effect. And this is where, that's what we were saying before, that it's difficult to come and understand this principle, where the ideas that we harbor in our mind and the feelings that we keep, and we, even though it doesn't show externally, actually have an effect. And the effect in this case is that we're repressing anger. We're bottling it up. Because we're saying, well, I'm not angry, even though our feelings are actually those of anger, meaning a feeling of unpleasantness, a feeling of seeing only faults, a feeling of wishing that things should be other than what they are. And that's where we get into repression. Okay? We're not believing ourselves, saying this is anger. So this is why it's very dangerous, okay? Because anger continues actually to seethe below the surface of our mind. And what happens, it gathers in strength until one day it inevitably explodes. And we've seen this already happen in others, and maybe it has happened to us in the past as well, where we're not really handling our anger. We're just going through the motions, even though we're not expressing it. And all of a sudden we explode, and then it becomes full-blown anger, and we destroy everything. And we do mistakes, and we regret. So it's actually very important to see that there's a difference between controlling anger and repressing anger. So now what we're going to learn is how we actually control anger when we see exactly what's going on in our mind. Basically, we first have to acknowledge honestly the angry stirrings in our mind for what they are. So we have to realize that allowing them to grow will only result in suffering. And then we make a free and conscious decision to respond more constructively. If we do this skillfully, really, anger will not have a chance to develop completely. And so there will be nothing to repress, actually, because anger won't exist. So once we learn to control and overcome our anger in this way, we will finally find some happiness. And what's important to understand here is that controlling anger does not mean that we're transforming it. It is really about being able to let it go. And it's not about transforming. It's like we're not trying to transmute anger into peace of mind, because the mind of anger cannot be transformed. It's a full-on expression of unpleasantness. So you cannot change unpleasantness to pleasantness. That's not what we're talking about here in controlling anger, or even to transform it or anything like that. And by trying to transform it or believing it has to be transformed will be to no avail, because we're pushing in the wrong direction. We're trying to change an element into something else. So the best way and to understanding what controlling anger in this case means, it means we have the ability to let it go, as opposed to it controlling us. Or that's what it means to control anger. It means that we understand that it's there, and we have the ability and we have the control to be able to let it go. And that's why in this case, we're not really repressing anything. We're actually letting go, as opposed to saying, it does not exist in my mind. I'm not angry, but it's really there. So that's the big difference. And this is a very important understanding to have. Otherwise, we'll just be fighting and we'll just be hurting ourselves. And expressing anger, like all those therapies that we might think that we have to like let it out in terms of like beating up a punching bag or something like that, could be detrimental, because what we're actually encouraging in our mind is to act out anger. Okay, so we're actually training ourselves to encourage anger in our mind, as opposed to understanding that living through the mind of anger in any which way of acting it out is actually doing the opposite. We're training our mind to act out anger. So we're not training to let it go. We're training to live through it. And so in terms of behavior training, it would actually be doing the opposite. we'd be training our anger to manifest, as opposed to training our anger to dissolve. And that's why it's important to understand the differences between controlling anger and repressing anger. So those who really wish to be happy, therefore, they should make an effort to free their minds from this poison of anger. So to summarize, as long as our mind is filled with anger, and we will never find happiness. We have to understand that anger is our real enemy. And until we remove it from our mind, it will continue to cause us unimaginable suffering. So therefore, instead of blaming other people or circumstances and viewing these as our enemies, we have to recognize that the anger within our mind is the real source of our suffering. Then, through looking at our mind and guarding our mind, by looking at it and remembering the faults of anger and to watch it arise, to be alert enough to see it arise, then we should take every opportunity to free our mind from this destructive state. So for the ending meditation, we're going to try to develop a state of not wanting anger. So what we're really going to try to develop is a mind that sees only faults in anger. That is convinced that anger is the poison in our life, and not the external circumstances and not the external people. Only then will we have a motivation. So that's the first step in this series with regards to anger. So the first part is to really acknowledge that anger is a problem, and that a state of mind actually causes suffering and destroys our peace of mind, and to come to the conviction that it's the problem. So the way the meditation will work in this case is that we're going to keep contemplating and try to make it as personal as possible. What that means is that we're going to look in our personal experiences in our life and see where anger has destroyed our happiness and has destroyed the happiness of others. And if you want, you could also use examples of other people that have gotten angry, and we could see the destructive nature of it. But we have to come to see that it's really a state of mind within us, and to let go of the blame that anger is due to others. So that's the first part of the meditation. So please take a comfortable meditation posture in which you can be both relaxed and alert. Now just take a few deep breaths to calm your mind. Now contemplate the following. Anger is a mind that focuses on an object, either animate or inanimate, feels it to be unattractive, and exaggerates its bad qualities, and then wishes to harm it. Anger is a state of mind that sees everything as problematic. It sees a bad person, a bad circumstance, and it could destroy our whole day. We stub our toe in the morning, and then we believe that everything else is bad. We hold on to this anger, and everything becomes unpleasant. It destroys relationships. It makes us say things that we don't want to say. It makes us destructive and aggressive. And it's the source of all the suffering in our life. This anger, which could be as subtle as annoyance or irritation or minor frustration, all the way to rage and hatred. This is all part of the same continuum or the same scale of the mind that sees something unattractive, that sees only problems and wishes to harm it. So come to find circumstances in our lives where we have gotten angry, and it only served to destroy. Destroyed the relationship, destroyed the conversation, to criticize others, and to blame, and it destroyed our happiness. Or imagine times where our anger has seen our partner as negative or a problem. Or we'll come to see how our anger has made us obsess about things, making our sleep restless, making the food we eat unpalatable or unpleasant, seeing a person approaching us to help us, yet we turn them away with anger, we push them aside. Come to see how no one wants to be next to an angry person. No one wants to approach them or be next to them. So if we're angry, we push away others just the same way. So in contemplating over and over how it's the state of mind that pushes away, that makes everything unpleasant, that destroys our inner peace and happiness, come to meditate on that long enough, analyze it, contemplate, use your personal experiences until you come to the conclusion that we have to stop blaming others, stop blaming other people or circumstances, and viewing these as our enemy. We have to recognize that the anger within our mind is the real source of our problem and our suffering. That anger is the poison, not external people or circumstances. So just as if we would have ingested a poison, we'd be rushing to get rid of it, to the hospital, to get its antidote, and get rid of it. Then we should come to see how anger is this inner poison that destroys our well-being and happiness, and the well-being of happiness of those around us. And just as a poison, we wish to get rid of it as fast as possible. So come to see how anger is the poison in our life, this state of mind. It serves only to destroy our inner peace and happiness. And once you have found this conviction, this feeling of disgust towards the state of mind of anger, our own state of mind of anger, not the ones of others, but our own, then meditate on that experience. That anger is a poison that only serves to destroy our inner peace and happiness. And if your mind wanders, then come back to contemplate, to find these personal experiences in your life. Come back to the conviction and conclusion that anger is the true poison, that anger is the cause of our suffering. now, in preparation to rising from meditation, make a determination to try and remember these teachings and try to watch for it in your own mind, to try and recognize the states of minds of anger as they arise in your mind, and to remember that it is the cause of our own suffering. So make this determination a decision to try and remember this and to try and apply it in your daily life. And now, before completely rising from meditation, dedicate all the positive energy you have accumulated in this session to each and every living being. You can imagine those close to you, your family and friends. Imagine them before you. And imagine that they receive all the benefits of your training, that they are able to recognize that anger in their mind is a poison that destroys their inner peace and happiness. So give them this energy, give them this wisdom, and rejoice in giving it to them. And now you can gently rise from meditation.